You can keep grabbing food, but we're gonna start with our next speaker. And just like a quick reminder, if you are in the first 2/3 of the room, everything you say is being picked up by folks on Huda. So please, like, if you're in the first 2/3, allow Huda to listen without feedback. All right, thank you. I'm so excited for folks to start quieting down so we can hear. Awesome, thanks guys. I want to introduce our next speaker, who's been a longtime friend of NAMI Washington, and NAMI Thurston Mason, having previously served as an MSW intern with NAMI Washington, with Southwest Washington, and then serving stints on both the Thurston Mason and NAMI Washington boards. Daryn Nelsen-Soza has gone from a peer leader to someone who now works for NAMI National, leading the provider education and sharing her story with law enforcement programs to help implement these programs nationwide. So please give a warm NAMI Washington welcome for Daryn Nelsen-Soza.
Well, thank you. I'm just so honored and pleased to be here today in person with all of you. I see familiar faces that I've either been in Zoom or other conferences with, so it's nice to kind of come home. It's really a good feeling. So there's a lot of things that I want to talk about. Everything that was talked about this morning, it makes me go, my program, we could do this, do that. So what I thought I would say is probably just going to come out as a data dump. So bear with me. But I want to talk to you about hope and resiliency, because each person that's in this room is here because you're resilient. And I think that we really need to remember and to celebrate us, right? We need to remember who we are. So I'm just honored and grateful to be here with you guys. And I thank the NAMI Washington staff and Thurston Mason staff and the board of directors. Honestly, I wouldn't be here if it weren't for you guys. So I thank you for allowing me to come alongside and work with you in these boards and things. So I know where I've come from and I know where I am right now, and they're like two completely different worlds. I'm what you would call a late bloomer. I went back and got a second bachelor's degree in psychology and then got a master's degree at 54. So it's never too late. I connected with NAMI, a lot of support from you guys to do those things. And I'm just so excited that I was able to take the next step and go to the national staff. But for those of you who don't know me, I grew up in Eastern Washington, small town, St. John. Woo, go Eagles. In case you don't know where it's at, it's over by Spokane. Very, very small town. I had 21 kids in my high school graduating class. So if I think 21 and 1 in 5 people have a mental illness, that means I went to school with a lot of kids with some struggles, and we never talked about it. There were never any resources. I was sharing yesterday with someone that I was one of those bad behavior kids. It's hard to believe now, but I was, the studies that they were talking about with the psychedelics, I did my own and it doesn't work. I brushed against law enforcement, that didn't work so good either. Multiple relationships, that didn't work so well either. So I've been down the road, and now I'm still on the same path, but I'm growing and I'm healing. And so as I think about growing up in rural Eastern Washington in 988, wow. What's that going to look like in a town of 500? First of all, it will probably be announced on the TV, the local TV channel, that Daryn Nelsen-Soza had a mental meltdown and they had to come from Colfax to pick her up. Right? My mom will know I'm on the way to the hospital before I know I'm on the way to the hospital, because that's the way it works in small towns. And you guys know that. I got a speeding ticket when I was a kid. Mom knew before I got home. That's not fair. It's just not fair. So I know the path of destruction, and I know what it's like to have those destructive behaviors. substance abuse, suicidal ideation. I think by the time I was 18, I tried to commit suicide 3 times. I didn't know what it was. I just didn't want to be there anymore. I grew up in a home that at times put the fun in dysfunctional. And other times they put the nightmare in dysfunctional. And so I'm learning and growing, and I find out about ACEs and all of this great stuff. And I figure out, you know, the ACEs score is 1 to 9. I'm a 7. So we think about all of those things and where I am now and what I've come here now and what I've learned. And my MSW program did not teach me anything about what I now embrace about who I am. I got all the book learning, I got all the school stuff, I know all about the old white guys psychology clubs, you know, Freud, and I know all those guys. But I also know about interpersonal neurobiology, I know about my brain, neuroplasticity, and I know that there's hope for recovery from mental health conditions. So I'm in this process, as well as you are and your family members are, of growing and growing up and changing. I'm 61. Last year, my birthday on April 25th, on April 28th, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I thought, oh boy, I've come through so much, I can handle this. Oh, I learned some more about myself. I learned that the traumas of my childhood all kind of filtered into the breast cancer. And I'm grateful and thankful that I stand today clear of breast cancer. I went through that process. I really started thinking about what does it mean for providers? And someone said this morning about your providers have mental health conditions too. And so that kind of all points me to my programs. It's funny, just a few minutes ago, I was out signing up the CEU sheet. And I saw that somebody was going to talk about provider and sharing your story with law enforcement. And I almost put my name down to get the CEUs, and then I remembered that's you. Can I get credit for this? So it's exciting to have gone from small town dysfunction into now working for the leading voice in mental health advocacy, policy, education, and support. It's like a dream. Right? It's just like a dream. It happened in a kind of a random conversation. I didn't know things were happening behind the scenes, but I said to our chief education director, Terry Brister, I said, think about me on my job. There's just too much toxic stress. There's too much trauma going on there. They don't get it. I think I'm going to leave. And she was like, yeah, well, what would you do? And I said, well, I'm in private practice. I can like that. I've been thinking about could do a whole variety of things. I could go work for hospital. Okay. And then I said, but you know what? My dream job would be to go to work for NAMIWACon. She went, oh, really? It was the first time I had ever vocalized that out loud, and within 6 weeks, I was working for her at NAMIWACon. It's all because of the resiliency and the hope. And because of you guys sharing your story and helping me down my path and my journey. It didn't happen in a vacuum. So I should be saying thank you to you for the work that you've done. There's been a survey done of 6,800 physicians, and they found out that they had 54% had depression. Depression. You go to your doctor, they have 2 in the office. 1.25 of them has depression. They also found that 39.8% of those surveyed had suicidal ideation. Guess what? Doctors are just like us. Nobody, and you guys know this, nobody has a corner on hearing and mental illness, and nobody has the corner on being able to just not let it happen. It doesn't discriminate. It's an equal opportunity thing. Doesn't matter how old you are, how young you are, what color you are, how skinny you are, how cute you are, how muscle cute you are. mental illness is a fact in our country. And I believe, I don't have any statistics for this, but I think it's higher here than it might be someplace like, I don't know, say Ireland. You know, we just have to play these things out. So as I think about all of this information and I begin to think about provider. Non-provider is a presentation for healthcare workers, not just doctors, not just mental health therapists, front desk staff, social workers, back office staff, people who do the phlebotomy stuff, people who walk you back, the MAs, the medical assistants, the physician's assistants, the nurse practitioners, all kind of fit into this bucket of a healthcare provider. That kind of blew my mind too when I realized that I was a provider. Those of you who are in the field kind of know. So I was just super excited when Terry said, I want you to come to work for me and work on provider. This is the program that you're going to do. You know it the best. You've taught it for a long time. And we want to figure out what we can do to make it a standard everywhere. So they'd gotten a little grant, $800,000, and that paid for my job for a couple of years at least, probably 10. And kind of got some things rolling about the program, and we have a video seminar that's going to be rolling out here, and I'm hoping before the end of October that takes the whole process, and instead of having to have a team of 5 or 3 to do the presentation, you can do it with 1. And you could do it in as little as an hour. So this class went from a 10-week session, 2.5-hour class, to a 5-week, to a seminar that kind of gives nuts and bolts, and now to this video presentation. And it's because Terry didn't let go of the dream of keeping this program alive. I am pleased to announce that a couple weeks ago, we were notified that we got a very large grant from an individual just for provider. It's never happened before. So I stand before you scared to death because now I really have to put, you know, proof to the pudding. I need to walk my talk and make some things happen. So provider, the team is a mental health therapist, a person in recovery, and a person who is a family member or a caregiver. And the program isn't about the mental health professional telling a story, reading material, and then our 2 other folks augment that. This is really about the lived experience and the voice of the family member and the individual mental recovery. The mental health professional needs to be somebody either in recovery or someone who has a family member. I could find all kinds of providers who will say, yeah, my aunt, my mom, my brother. It's really hard to find a provider that will stand up and say, hi, my name is Daryn Nelsen. So I forget that sometimes. And I have a mental illness. I have major depressive disorder. I struggle with PTSD. I have disordered eating and some anxiety. To get a professional to say that is, you know, herding rabbits. It just doesn't happen. So that's usually where places fall down and not feeling like they can have this program because they don't think they have people that fit that role. They do. They just don't really do fit their role yet. So the 15-hour class or the 4-hour seminar can be offered for continuing education units. It's the only NAMI program at this point that can be offered for people to get CEUs for it. And it's because it's for professional healthcare workers, right? We all have to pay for credit for our licenses and renewal of licenses. So it's a way for our affiliates and our state offices to maybe augment a little bit of income and say, okay, we'll do this class for you, but it's going to cost you X amount of money. And here's how we'll do it. And you'll get CEUs for it. And then we put things in place. So we talk about empathy. We don't talk about empathy. No, we don't talk about the lived experience. And, you know, here's my worst story about going to the emergency room and how they not only traumatized my child or my spouse or me, but how they traumatized me as a caregiver. We talk about that. We talk about not the medical stuff, not the drugs, not the treatment plans. We talk about what does it mean to draw in a family member to the conversation, and why are family members sometimes hesitant to get involved. Well, it's not that they're hesitant to get involved, they're burnt out, right? You're tired. I just can't do it. Burn the bridge. I just can't make that happen. And so when Johnny comes in, then he's med seeking, he's not med compliant, he's a problem. Let's just kick him back out because there's really nothing we can do. And his family doesn't even care, so why should I? That's horrible. Absolutely horrible. I'm a big proponent for if you want mental health services to be in our emergency rooms and our doctors' offices, then we need to figure out a way to give doctors the training that they need to be able to address those issues. And asking the PHQ2 is not addressing the health issues. Are you sad today? Well, in this moment, yes, I am. Are you thinking that you'd be better off gone? Well, I wish I were somewhere else. Okay. Well, maybe we'll send you to a mental health. Most often those just get put in a file somewhere, and maybe I put it to a client record. I come from working at an FQHC, so they saw it day after day after day. And an FQHC is a federally qualified health center. And we didn't have the staff, we didn't have the capacity, and we definitely did not have the staff that knew how to spot somebody in mental health crisis. We had a young man that came into the office who was suicidal. They sat him in an exam room with all the sharps, the scalpels, you know, the sharp things that they cut people with, medications in glass jars. And they shut him in the room and they walked out. And when I heard this young man was in the clinic, because I knew him, I was just like, you have got to be kidding me. You just gave him the tools to take his life. Well, then they didn't go to the room, they called 911. What? Who sent sheriffs to the clinic, guns, the whole, you know, 9 yards. And when they opened the door, here were 2 police officers to greet this kid. They hauled him down to the hospital. And he figured out, you know, if I say that I'm not suicidal, they'll let me go. He had no shoes. It was December and it was cold and wet. If you live in Vancouver, Washington, we get cold and wet in December. Had no jacket. They led him out of the hospital. He walked the 3.5 miles home. There's something really wrong with that. Something really wrong with that. So we need to make sure that we're going to talk to providers about our mental health, that we also advocate for them to get what they need so that they can address our needs. We need to have more providers so that they don't have to do 26 appointments in a day, and they don't have to spend their whole evening doing case notes. We have social workers, we do a lot of paperwork. I get it. But to see 26 patients in a day and then have to do the paperwork, because that's what Medicaid and Medicare demand. We need more staff, we need more money, we need more mental health education, because they don't get it. So provider has been around for a long time. It's ebbed and flowed as people have been interested in it, but right now people are really interested in this program. There's NAMI Iowa on their website under their education for provider has a video from the medical staff at Des Moines University, who every year teaches provider to their 2nd and 3rd year medical students. And those kids have to come back, well, young adults have to come back to campus to do provider. So at this point, nobody can tell me that it can't be done because I'm watching it happen. We can get this program into our schools, into our higher education. I was thinking this morning, we were talking about, you know, early childhood education in schools, and what we can do to do that. Well, let's develop a provider for school teachers. Yes. Why not? Guess what? I can do that. So we've talked about provider for firefighters or EMTs, a little bit different population, but they need the information. And so I could talk about provider forever. Forever, because I'm so excited about everything that we're doing right now. We're addressing some of the disparities, not just for us as individuals and families with mental health issues, but for our providers to get the help that they need also. So that's part of the development of the program this next year, is to talk a little bit more about self-care and wellness and how to take care of yourself when you're in these frontline kind of positions. And with that, that allows me to kind of transition over to sharing your story with law enforcement. Have anybody heard about that? A little, maybe not. Sharing your story with law enforcement is based off of In Our Own Voice, where you guys are going in and doing presentations at the crisis intervention trainings or the law enforcement training schools in your areas. In Our Own Voice kind of is broad in the discussion. Sharing your story with law enforcement brings it right down to what happened to you when you engage with law enforcement. My story is I was about 15. I stole my parents' car and the alcohol covered. And I was in Spokane and it was winter. I never did anything bad unless it was cold outside. Something wrong with that. Still in the car, taking the booze, was in Spokane, just smashed off of all recognition. And a cop showed up. And I stepped out of the car and talked to him because I was fine. And we talked for a second. The next thing I know, he's trying to put me in his cop car. I wasn't under arrest. He was just going to go get me some help. And he touched the back of my head. The next thing I know, I'm on the ground in the snow with his knee in the middle of my back. I don't know. I think when he tried to be gentle with me to help me in the car, I just went, I grew up with your boys. They push you down and beat the snot out of you. So I was fighting back. The thing that was different for me about that encounter was that he came to Judy Hall when my parents said, oh, she's in jail. Leave her ass there. So this cop came in and he sat, and the only thing I remember about him is he had a necklace that had big old seed beads on it. Can't remember his name. When all of you walked up and said I was the one. But that's all I remember about him. And he talked to me about why did I do what I did? And it was the first time that I was able to tell somebody what was going on in my house. So for a little bit, things changed, and then it just went right back to the way it was. So it didn't stop what was happening. So to be able to tell that story to a policeman in his turf on his time, he was like, oh, a policeman made a difference because he went an extra step to help you. He did. Probably one of the reasons I'm still alive. So we share our stories, we go into CIT, we hope to not, if we could take a drug to cure all of this and fix all of this, my God, wouldn't we all take it? Wouldn't we all sign up to take it? Sure we would. I would, yes, be honest, I would. But we can't. All we can do is raise our voices together. All we can do is say, hey, wait a minute, we're real people, we bleed just like you do, we think just like you do, we talk just like you do, and share those stories, and talk and talk and talk and talk. You know why NAMI is where it is today? Because y'all talked. You know how NAMI started? It's because they all talked, right? They all had some communication and said, we need to do this. So if we want to shift the needle of how society perceives individuals with mental health issues, then we need to talk. The whole oral tradition, you remember that? Yeah. Anybody get taught that in school? I did. Probably don't teach it now, but I did taught that. That whole tell your story, tell me what's going on. My favorite thing is to sit down with somebody and have them share their narrative with me. Tell me your story. Because your story touches me. My story is going to touch you. But maybe that voice would be the voice of hope and resilience. And if there hadn't been people all the way along my life, from the time I was 3, when the first abuse began to happen, people had to step up next to me and said, "You're going to be okay. I don't understand it. You're going to be okay." I wouldn't be resilient today. I wouldn't be able to deal with breast cancer, have a stressful, toxic job, and then have things change. NAMIWACon is here to support your state offices and you guys. I know that several of you have had contact with the education team. I'm on the research support and education team. We're all going to meet up next week and I'm going to tell them what a beautiful group you guys are. And I'm just so proud of the work that you're doing, the conversations that you're having. And I just really want to encourage you to advocate for yourself, advocate for your families, because if you don't, no one else will. So thank you for your time.